Shalom, welcome to our Erev Shabbat talk, Erev Pesach. Yesterday we began a talk entitled Time Travel in the Haggadah of Passover. Well, in such a subject, we need more than one part to properly even begin to deal with the ideas that we're presenting. We began yesterday with an idea that is profound and important for every human being. And of course, that idea is that time is relative to the tool of perception, relative to the mind of the perceiver. And we learn, of course, the famous verse that for God, 1 day is 1,000 human years. And so when we look at that idea, we start to see that what Rabbi Nachman teaches is that the larger your consciousness, the less time you experience. And the more we're attached to the physical world, we're more bound by time. And we also learned yesterday that emotions, love, hate, peace, anxiety, contract and modulate the passage of time. So that's why, of course, when you fall in love, time goes very fast. And when you fall out of love, it's unbearably slow. And when you're going on a journey, on the way, it seems very slow. And on the way home, it's, well, rather quick. Because our emotional relationship to what's happening around us is changing. And that shows us how time is a relative quality. It is not a fixed idea as it's presented to us, growing up in this world. A day is a day because the sun, is where it is, and the earth turns 24 hours and we're back to where we were, and the moon is a 30-day cycle. Those are all true things, but we're not fixed by them. Our soul is above those qualities and those traits and those powers called sun, moon, and stars. We're coming from a high above time, transcendental level, and then the soul is brought down into this world in a body, and we have to do what we have to do. Okay. And we also learn along these ideas that the idea of time travel is the ability of the mind to transcend its present location. As the Baal Shem Tov says, you are where your thoughts are. So if you're attached enough to your thoughts, then you're going to be there. And going further, we understand that where we go when we go above time is to where there is no time. No time means past, present, and future are all playing in the same movie at once. And God sees all history as one. Now, it's interesting if you think about it, that the redemption story of the Passover Haggadah takes place about halfway through the human story. Now, anybody who studied a little bit of drama knows that you have there's a bell curve to the structure of a good story or novel, right? And that the middle of the story is when the big change happens. And of course, the big change for the Jewish people and ultimately for the human race was the introduction of the Ten Commandments and the Torah and a moral way of looking at this planet and this human race. Okay. And so we see that it's halfway through the story already. The Torah was given to us. And now we are where we are, getting close to the climax, hopefully, and the true transformation of this world into a place that is much more like heaven than it is now, meaning above time. And so we learned that our mind is the vehicle. This is called Maseh Merkava, the workings of the chariot. A chariot is a vehicle for travel. And we're talking here about the travel not from New York to Tel Aviv. We're talking about the travel from this place in time to other places in time. Where do we see proof of this kind of idea? Well, the rabbis say a fascinating thing. They say that when you speak the words of a rabbi who died thousands of years ago, his lips vibrate in the grave. Now, is that something you could make up? Is that some kind of rabbinical sci-fi? That we sit in the Beit Midrash and say, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, and the lips of Moses vibrate over on Har Nebo across the river here. Or that you say, Amar Akiva Kla Gadol b'Torah, ve'afta l'recha kamocha. Rabbi Akiva said a great general principle. Love your neighbor as yourself. Well, really it means your friend, re'echa, your friend, because not all neighbors are friends and not all friends are neighbors, right? Rabbi Akiva's lips are vibrating up there in Tiberia. How does that happen? Well, it only happens when we study enough Kabbalah to understand the inside working of creation, that our voices are connected to our souls and our souls are connected to the tree of life. And when you pull on one leaf on a giant tree, it will vibrate somewhere else on that same tree. And so when you say the words of Torah, you're vibrating the lips of the one who originally said those words. And that, my friends, is your voice traveling through time. Because those men died thousands of years ago. But their soul is above time and so is ours. And so we're talking much closer to each other than we realize. Over physical time, well, it's a long time ago. But in spiritual time, it's not far at all. Because we're going to a level where past, present, and future are one. Now, so, of course, the real question that we all want to know is, how do we time travel? Well, the Haggadah is preparing us for this journey. The Haggadah is structured in a way to do the things that we need to do to get ready. And we learned last night also that Hey Lachmanya, the bread of affliction, is when you turn your affliction into bread, into nourishment, into life force. Because you deal with what has happened to you and you analyze it and understand it and accept it and learn from it. And that teaching of your suffering becomes the bread of your power and future. Now, that's not an easy thing to do. Because afterwards in the Haggadah, we have to eat the bitter herbs and taste the salty tears. But that's okay, because this is all a preparation for greater and greater levels that the Haggadah is going to bring to us. And so going forward, in the Haggadah, we have the idea of manishtana. Why do they bring this? It's such a beautiful little moment in the Seder of Passover when the little child that just learned Hebrew and is learning in Cheder, or in the little school around the corner, and they're teaching them manishtana halayla zeh. Mikol haleilot. What's changed about this night? What's happening? What's happening for adults? Oh, it's cute. We watched a little kid. But, well, aren't we supposed to ask the question too? What's changed? So the manishtana, is a question. And the point is, even if you know the whole Torah backwards and forwards, you still need to ask the question. Because the question is the vessel to receive a new answer. And if I don't ask the question, I have no vessel to receive an answer. So the first thing the Haggadah wants, after we accept our afflictions as being our food, our bread, the matzah, right? Then we have to dip it in tears. We have to go with the idea of this question of what has changed? Maybe nothing's changed. Maybe I've gotten older, more grumpy, more fixed in my mental space, more tired, lazy. I don't know. A lot of things change, but is it for the good? But what we're doing by asking the question is creating the vessel to get the right answer. And that's why we approach God in the first place. We want the real answers. We don't want fake news anymore. Not on TV and not in our hearts. And the fake news is the old news. We want the real truth. And how we ask for it creates the vessel to receive it. And if you don't believe me, go out and tell somebody a piece of Kabbalah or Torah that you learned. If they don't want to hear it, if they don't ask for it, they cannot hold the answer. They'll say, why are you bothering me? I don't want to hear about your religion. I don't want to hear about Kabbalah. I don't want to hear about Judaism. I don't want to hear about Moses. They don't ask the question. Then there's no vessel to give them an answer. And then they're frustrated, and you get frustrated. Not only do you get frustrated, Rabbi Nachman says that your words come back to demand revenge. Why did you speak me in a world that doesn't want to hear me? And that happens a lot when you're out there in the world trying to bring people closer to Hashem. And you have to get smart. When to talk, when to not to, when to ask the question. How do you create a question in somebody's heart? This is real wisdom. Of course, and that takes us in the Haggadah to the next level. The sages of Bnei Brak are sitting around on Passover night. And, we have these great sages that, the Jewish world has revered for thousands of years. And they're talking. And one says, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Aiti ben shivim shana. I was like 70 years old. And at this time, he was very young. He was, I believe, 18. But he was a genius. And he became one of the wealthiest men in Am Yisrael for his time. But we're told, of course, the Midrash explains to us that he had a moment, with the help of the Kabbalah, that he had a moment of illumination that was so high that his beard turned white. Does that sound crazy? Your beard could turn white in one day? It took mine a couple years. How? How does it happen? Because the ancient light, the more ancient the light you access, the more your soul conforms to that light. If you're not accessing the deeper light, you're accessing new ideas that aren't so new, aren't new to you, that aren't new to your soul, that aren't new to the levels of the creation, then you're not really traveling the staircase home. You're not really entering this idea of time travel, going back to the beginning, because it's always going back to the beginning, which is the Creator, who's above time. So when we're going back to the beginning, we don't think of it as going backwards in time. It's going above time. And so Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah touched this level called the Ancient of Days, Atik Yomin, which is high in the tree of life, in what's called the Keter, the Partsuf of the Keter, the persona called the crown, which embraces everything else in creation. It's above creation, actually, as we understand it. And so, but here we are now, somewhere else in time. We're in Bnei Brak 2,000 years ago. And these rabbis are talking, and we're supposed to be paying attention and be interested. But when we understand that what the Baal Shem Tov told us, that you are where your thoughts are, can you be there? Well, if our hearts are pure enough and our mind is open enough, then if your thoughts are there, if you're really attached to that thought, then you're there. Now, I remember once I asked a very sweet and holy Rabbi Nachman Kahana in Jerusalem, I asked him how his vacation was in Sfat. It's an innocent question you ask your rabbi, and he said, "What do you mean?" I was with Rabbah and Abaye, and Rava and Shmuel, and Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Meir. And I looked at him, I said, did the rabbi, I'm thinking to myself, what happened here? And I realized, no, wait, he was learning Talmud, and he was with those rabbis. And he wasn't in the streets of Sfat buying strawberries, and he could have been out hiking in the forest, but if he's opening the book and he's learning the pages of the rabbis, how could he answer like that except for what we just said? That when we say the words of the rabbis, their lips are vibrating in the grave because your soul is engaging their soul at this above place time. Through voice, through the saying the words out loud. And that's very important because when we think words, they don't vibrate into creation like when we say them. And it's those vibrations that connect to the former original vibrations of the statements. Now, but I can give it another example. And that's a very mundane example. Is when you go to a movie. And the movie's false. It didn't happen. It's not a true story. But for the moment that you're in the movie, the hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever it is, you suspend your disbelief. You actually believe you're there. And you identify with the characters, whether it's the hero or the villain or the princess, whoever it is. Our hearts are naturally going to gravitate towards the character, and it's not about truth or it happened or not anymore, because my mind is locked on to the story. So it's all about the locking on of the mind to an idea. And the problem, I'm afraid, in an ADD generation is our pliers, our vice grips of the mind are worn out, and that's another discussion we don't want to really go to today. But the point is, we still have the ability to attach our minds to holy ideas and to understand how they transform us. Now, another way we can even look at it is similar, is when you read a book. When you read a book, what are you actually doing? You're putting aside your mind to take in the mind of the author into your head. And you're hearing his voice tracking sentences through your mind. They're no longer your thoughts. They're his thoughts. So when we learn holy books, we're taking the minds, pieces of the minds of those great authors into our mind. And guess what? We feel lifted, uplifted, illuminated, happy, at peace, in grace. All these positive things happen when we learn these books, because we're bringing holiness into the mundane. Which, I'm afraid that most of us are dealing with mundane things most of the week. Hopefully Shabbat, we're not. Okay, so we see that this journey to Bnei Brak is a journey. If you're willing to take it, if you're willing to push aside your mind, to take the rabbi's words into your mouth, to take their images and the ideas into your head, you're one with them for that moment. And we even have a concept in Kabbalah called Ibur Neshama, which is explained by Rabbi Chaim Vital in the 4th section of his book on meditation, Shari Kedusha, at the end of the book. And he tells us that if you do a mitzvah perfectly, as it was done in the mind of God when he first created the mitzvah, the soul of the rabbi who first perfected that mitzvah, because remember, mitzvahs weren't given out all at once, and they weren't perfected all at once by human activities. But when you do it perfectly for one moment, you attract the soul of a great sage that once also did that mitzvah perfectly, because we're like attaching to a place in the template called the 613 commandments of the Torah. So you draw the soul of the one who is perfect before you into your soul by doing the mitzvah. And this Ibur Neshama can last a moment, it can last a day, it can last a week, and it can do a lot more things that we're not going to get too fantastic about right now, because we don't want to enter the imaginative too far, because this stuff is real. It just took me 30 years to figure it out, because I wanted to know. And once you want to know, you have what's called Ratzon. Ratzon, Reish Tzadik Vav Nun, is desire or will. But the Arizal teaches us desire and will are the same letters in Hebrew as tzinor, the pipe, the channel. That when you have desire, you automatically create the channel to the thing you desire. So if you have desire for the thing you're doing, well, you automatically have a vehicle for connecting to it. And that's what the heart does when it unifies with the mind. So that takes us to the next step on the Haggadah, which is the 4 sons, the wise son, and he's called the wicked son. And then, of course, the simple son, the one who does not even know how to ask. What is the Haggadah doing here? It's teaching us about kavanah, intention. We have to have intention before you do anything. If I do something mindlessly, it's called no intention. If I put on my tefillin and then I can't remember if I made a blessing, that means I had no intention when I made the blessing. Right? If I give charity but don't think about the mitzvah of giving charity, I don't connect my mind to the will of the Creator who wants us to give charity. If you just reach in your pocket and throw out a coin, you haven't done charity according to the level of the mind and of the soul. And so this is why we have to set kavanah, set intentionality to our deeds before we do them, which just means we're inducing mind power into heart power. We're unifying, we're making connection between the intellectual and the emotional. And in Kabbalah, these are called worlds. Okay, so the 4 sons, what are they doing? Well, the first son says, what are these laws and these statutes and these judgments that you're learning? He wants to know what God wants from us. That's called the wise son. He's not wise because he knows things. He's wise because he asks the right questions. And those questions are about God's will. So that's what wisdom is, wanting to know what God wants. It's not that hard. The next son, the wicked son, what does he do? He says, no, what are all these things to you? Not me. I don't need your religion. I don't need your belief systems. I don't need your books. I'm fine the way I am. Well, that's his business. But he's still called the wicked son because he disconnects himself to the will of the people. And of course, he's not interested in the will of God. That's what wickedness is. I don't care. I'd rather not have God telling me what to do. Okay, so you see, each of them has a kavanah in their question. The next one says, what is all this? He's called the simpleton. He's not yet able to connect the dots in the program, right? He can't put a picture together that God has for the world. That there's a time called exile, and there's a time called redemption. There's a time called before Torah and after Torah, and then the revelation of the Torah of the future. He doesn't have the mindset yet able to connect all the dots. He's called the simple son. And so he says, what is all this? What is it? Tell me. But at least he's asking a question. So that's already setting the mind in the right direction, so to speak. Now, the final son, the one who does not know to ask, what's his deal? Well, I asked myself this question about the final, the one who does not know to ask. What does that mean? I started to think of categories in psychology because I'm a therapist, and I wondered, well, does this mean he's intellectually dead inside? He doesn't have a soul. He's been damaged. What does it mean? But the idea, I think, is that a person who sees something strange to him, sometimes he's overwhelmed and he doesn't know what to ask at all. He doesn't know. Not only does he not know what's going on, he can't even cognate the words of a question. It's just overwhelming. You're just kind of like, your mind goes blank. It's that pre-cognitive moment, that moment where I can't even get the idea out into letters, into words, into a sentence, to ask, what is all this? It's a person who's completely overwhelmed by reality, and he's not able to ask. He's called the one who does not know to ask. No, you have to have a certain amount of knowledge to ask the right question, or any question. When people come into to a shiur or to a class and they start asking questions not about what we're learning, it shows me they're not there, right? We're opening to a certain page in the Talmud or in the Halakha or in the chassidut, and they start asking questions about other things. So what it tells me is that they're in their soul, but they're not with us in the class. So, as a teacher, there's ways to handle this in a proper way to show respect, but not let the class lose, the reins of what's going on there, and the horse will run away. But rather, the one who does not know, we also have an answer. We have an answer for him. We tell him a tiny brief recap of the story of the Jewish people, what our Father in heaven did for us when our forefathers came out of Egypt. We start to tell a very micro version of the story. And that micro version is really a spark or a seed that we're hoping will grow in the mind to create a space to ask the right questions, which of course we had in the second stop on our journey through the Haggadah, the Manishtana, because there's a person who's not even at the level of asking what's changed tonight because he doesn't connect his nights. He doesn't see life in its patterns. And that's unfortunate, of course. So all of these ideas we still have not yet left. We have not left our bodies. We have not entered the true time travel. We're trying to. We're making efforts through the, going backwards with the words of the sages, going backwards with the memories of childhood when we first saw, the Aron Kodesh open and they showed us the Sefer Torahs. It was a big moment. I remember as a little kid. They'd open up the Ark and you'd see these Sefer Torahs and there was this kind of otherworldly glow happening in that synagogue. Because a little child, that's why it says in the end of days, by the way, that children and crazy people will have prophecy. In other words, the prophets won't. The sages won't. But the children and the crazy people will. Why? Because they're not bound by preconceived notions about what is. They're open to being. They're open to something. Even if they don't know what the something is, their openness makes them a channel to receive from a higher place. Well, a person who's always cogitating and using his mind to try to logicize things and figure things out through his intellect is not making space in his own intellect for the higher intellect that we all contain a spark of. And that's what it's about, folks. That's what it's about. To leave Egypt, to enter the sea, to experience the miracles, I've got to leave a part of my critical thinking. I want to keep my critical thinking. I don't want to be a fool, but I want to put it on hold for a moment and just explore reality as it's coming to me. What does God want from me now? Is a good question, because immediately I'm putting aside what I think for something much greater, and with belief that he knows and cares and he's there. And when we have that down, it becomes another whole experience. And religion is no longer a trip or an onus or a punishment or something I have to do because my parents taught it to me. It becomes a choice of love. And tonight is, I believe, the night that God loved the Jewish people more than ever. When he took us out of Egypt and he brought us to the sea and he's opened the sea, and then we, came out. And well, of course, it took a few more days before we got to Mount Sinai and got the Torah. But this is the moment of history. It's when the peak of the story is happening. And when we can open up to that, we can receive something very special on this night. And this night is, the Kabbalists say, it is the number one prayer of the entire year, more than Yom Kippur, more than Rosh Hashanah. Because it's a tamsit. In Hebrew, it's a concentration of all the prayers at one moment, at one time, to access miracles. So now is the time to prepare to ask for your miracle, whatever your miracle is. Because whenever God does something, it becomes engraved where? In time. And tonight is the time of the miracles. So we're going to go on with another portion of this class, hopefully Saturday night, Motzi Shabbat, from here in Eretz Yisrael. Because there's still, there's more material, believe it or not, in this Haggadah about this journey in time and how we can be above it and get through it and enjoy it. And we should all be blessed with a taste of what is the true redemption from exile. God bless you all. Shabbat Shalom. Hag Sameach.